everybody. I am Alessandra Venturini, the holder of the Jean Monnet Chair on European Migration Studies. I'm glad to continue the seminar, the satellite seminar, Dreufare, that means Driver European Family Reunification. We are at the, I think, sixth lecture, and I am myself doing this lecture, and I'm very happy that we go on with such interesting lecture in which we try to understand the driver of family reunification, which are not only in the economic field, but which are in the deep culture of the family in the different country of origin. So I share some slides. I would like to start with the idea that the research disregards completely this the subject of the driver of family migration. So, for instance, I am an economist, and I will show you how I see that the research is weak in this field. But it is enough to say, to recall that no variable referring to the characteristic of the family law, family culture in the country of origin is used in the analysis of the driver of migration. While there is a lot of research on the economic driver of migration, which are, however, only related to labor migration, or there are now a lot of research on the driver of asylum seeker, or people that escape ecological disaster. So there is an attempt to understand why people move, to understand the size. There is none. Nobody is studying the effect of family reunification and the dynamic of family reunification. And this is a big weakness in the research. This is especially important when we speak of forecast. You remember that we were speaking about the stereotype. The stereotype are that Africa is demographically booming, and horde of migrants will come to Europe. This is a stereotype, but a stereotype which is based on the demographic transition that Africa has not reached yet. Africa is growing. There are still 3 children per woman, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. And if we forecast, we apply the immigration rate of other countries to this amount of population, the number of migrants that will come will be many. And the number is very consistent. And this is, of course, an example of how not appropriate are the modeling that we use. The economic forecast base migration only on the economic incentive. Of course, if the income per capita in South European country at the end of the 80s was more or less similar to the income per capita of France, Germany, Switzerland, and so on, you understand easily that the immigration from South European countries stopped. So it's not difficult to understand the reduction of migration, more complex to understand the dynamic of migration when still there is a strong incentive in moving. The incentive, of course, is not only in income per capita, but is also in possibility of finding a job. This is reason why this is very important to understand it. So the forecast, not taking into account the driver of family reunification, should be taken with care. And in fact, as you know, while you can very easily forecast demographic evolution, it's very difficult to forecast immigration. The forecasts made are always wrong, and the economists are less used to forecast, but being a migration demographic variable, demographers are used to forecast. They forecast the population in 30 years. That's mean because they take the stock of population of a given age bracket. They bring this after 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and they apply to this size of the population the mortality rate. So they have only to control for the mortality rate. And so it's very easy to make demographic forecasts, which in general are right. There are risk of being inadequate, but in general, right. So the forecasts are very complex. Which variables are used in general to understand the migration flow? In general, these are, you have a cohort, because migrants are only young. You try to forecast migration flow using the size of the cohort. If the cohort is shrinking, like in Europe, of course, you will have less migrants. If the cohort are increasing, potentially you can have more migrants. It depends if the demand for local demand for labor will increase. But it's also now, as you see, very easy. It depends on many other reasons, which are the health situation in the world. The pandemic has shown that there are other variables to add to the usual one. And also if there are war, the political international situation. So that means that European, given the war that there is between Russia and Ukraine, they will not go to Russia anymore. So even if they're not active, involved in the conflict, the mobility toward the area of conflict in general is declining. So, but let us imagine that we live in a peaceful period, in a healthy period where there is not. In general, you want to model the migration, you take economic variable. You consider, first of all, income differential. But income differential is not enough. So you have people that move from poor country into rich country. But rich country who are moving, who has jobs to offer. So it's not enough that there are a country is richer than another. It is important that there is demand for additional labor. So I would say that the income per capita differential is a condition. You never go to a poor country. But the unemployment differential is the prerequisite. If there is not an employment differential, if you can find jobs there are not jobs available, you don't go there. And in fact, when there is a recession in the destination country and the unemployment rate increase, people is fired, migration decline. So more jobs are available, more people will move. So this is the initial prerequisite. And of course, the demand varies according to the skill. For instance, we know that the United States a very strong demand for highly skilled, especially for STEM workers. And they have a cap, which can be closer, larger or smaller, which define the amount of highly skilled that they let in. So if you have a country which has a cap, a very large cap for highly skilled, you will have more highly skilled. So when you consider the population cohort, you should apply to the highly skilled population a larger coefficient than to low skilled population. So when you apply the economic driver, you have to consider the reference population. So if you have a large cap for highly skilled, there is a larger probability that the highly skilled will go. Or the coefficient, you divide the data set by group, the coefficient for the highly skilled is larger than for the low skilled. If instead the labor market provide only low skilled position, the low skilled will move more and the highly skilled will not go there. You remember the ROI model. The ROI model is just explain the incentive according to the income distribution of the country destination. This is the rewarding. With the ROI model, we only consider the rewarding. We don't consider the number. But of course, the rewarding is weighted by the amount of jobs available. in the economy. So these are the incentives. After you can have the cost. Infrequently we say why migrant is not, we should explain not why migrant come, why migrant don't come. The income difference is so high that you should have more people moving. And the answer is that there are costs. A cost stop migration. First of all, the distance, also the language, because of course you prefer to go to a country which is closer, but closer means also linguistically closer or culturally closer. A country with the same weather, with similar life condition. So effect same border, the variable same border is always significant. So the Italians went to France, the Spanish went to France. The first destination was the closer country. The Dutch went to Germany. The Irish went to UK. So the distance, which the same border, the distance, the colonial tie is playing also, the colonial tie is playing also long distance trip. For instance, the Indian then go to the UK because they were part of the first, of the British Empire. And why the Moroccan go to France? Because France, Morocco was a French colony. And so the high educator in Morocco is French. So you have to understand that there are costs, and the costs reduce migration. Another variable which is very important is the size of the community in destination country. The size of the community is very important for many reasons. First of all, because the community can provide information. They can tell you there is a job available now at Fiat. Now there are not jobs available, but once there were, a lot of Italians suggest to their relatives to come. But the community can also finance your mobility. So they can lend you money to pay for the trip. In addition, when you come, they tell you about the jobs available. They put you in contact, they host you, they put you in contact with employers, and you can find easily job. So the community is provide information. Information is crucial. However, so many times the community provide wrong information. They tell to the relatives that they are living like king, queen, especially the women. They have a fantastic life, they earn a lot of money, they're very happy and so on. And when the relatives come, instead they discover that the story is not the same. So frequently the community is a transfer information, but the information only a little bit distorted, they become a little bit emphatic. But anyhow, the community is playing a very important role because the information is always complex and you go where you have a community. You don't go to another area. You go there because having somebody that speaks your language, that understands your culture, piece of family, help the integration. And the life in a destination country is always difficult. And so this represents a possibility for improving your well-being. We mentioned before the linguistic distance, which is very important because if you speak French, Italian, Spanish, a little bit of understanding you have. If you speak German, Arabic or Chinese, the communication is very difficult. So the linguistic distance is very important, but the linguistic distance is also very correlated with the cultural distance, because the language represents a way of speaking, a way of communicating. And the language and the culture are going together. Osfede make an index of cultural distance using 5 questions. Society which are more centralized, less decentralized, society which are better organized on other, to create this cultural distance. However, the linguistic distance and cultural distance are very strongly correlated, because the language is also a proxy of more similar society. Latin languages have more similar society than Arabic, and the Arabic language has more similar society. On the same line, we have different religions, different trade in cultural goods. This is an important contribution. Instead of considering only the trade of goods, you can have the trade in cultural goods. That means that if the country trade in cultural goods, it means that the consumer like the goods of the culture which is exported. Let us say, if Morocco import cultural goods from Spain, you can imagine that the cost of going to Spain is declining, because the distance between the two declines. The research has found in many occasions that trading goods is already a good proxy, especially if you don't consider machinery and so on, but you consider food. Trading food is already a proxy of two cultures that become closer and closer. So these are the traditional variables which are used to explain migration, without distinguishing between family migration, labor migration, student migration, and frequently without even distinguishing for asylum seeker. I'll show you an example. The reading for this class is the article of Migari from ERC Knowledge Center Migration Demography. And in this analysis, you have the GDP per capita in the origin country, the unemployment rate in destination country. So you move more easily, the lower is the unemployment rate in destination country. So there are more jobs available. And if the income per capita in your country is increasing less. After we have colonial link, common language, distance, which are variable of cost. After you have network, the community that we discussed before, and the trade between destination and origin. O and D means origin, destination. T means time. Of course, you migrate today because last year there was a lot of trade. So these variables are without time because there is just one number for each period. All the other has a time index, also the community, the size of the community before you move. While instead the income per capita of today and the unemployment rate of today are the economic variable in the regression. Of course, people is not consider the unemployment rate of today. They have a forecast. They hope that tomorrow the unemployment rate became the same. and they have forecast for tomorrow, and so the forecast is similar, they move now. Okay, these are the variables, and when we go and look at the regression, Michael is the only one that divides the people according to the resident permit with which they entered. Let us see work. The unemployment rate in the destination country is negative, significant and negative as expected. That means that you expect that people is not going the destination country if the unemployment rate increase. So it's negative. While the GNP in the country of origin is not significant, we will explain later on why it's not significant. If you have geographical distance, you don't go in faraway country because it's more expensive to go there. Trade is not significant. Common language favor the mobility. Colonial link favor the mobility. The community in the country of destination is, of course, positive and very important. Now, given that this variable in general are not divided by group, instead, if you look to family migration, you see you have 6,800 observation for labor migrants. And you have 9,000 for family unification. So for family unification, we have the unemployment rate is irrelevant. GNP per capita in origin country is positive. The richer is the country of origin, the more migrant you will have. Geographical distance is not relevant for family unification because I go and reach my husband. So this is not a point. Like the distance, I can reach him in Sweden, I can reach him in South Italy, is the same. It's irrelevant, the geographical distance. The community, of course, is very important. Trade is not important. The unemployment rate in destination country is irrelevant for me because I don't go there to work. The common language is important because it will be easier my integration if the language is the same, colonial link is the same. So the differences for family member and for worker are many, especially in the crucial variable, income per capita. This is not significant. This is insignificant. Unemployment rate, this is significant, this is not significant. So not to say education of course GNP per capita in the origin country, significant geographical distance is significant, the nectar is significant, the trade is not significant, the unemployment rate is playing a negative role because I go and study in UK if I hope to find a job. Common language. The only variable that remain the same in all the equation are common language and colonial link. Also trade, but is not significant in any one. So if this is the only analysis in which the migration choice is analyzed by channel of entrance. And this is the GNP per capita in the origin countries is a crucial variable for the economist because we have the model of the inverted U shape, so that if you are very poor, you are so poor that you don't move. If your income increase, you move. If your income increase from already mixed level, you don't move anymore. And Migali, to study this, is trying to do this. So always migration flow over the population, GDP per capita, fertility, expansion in education, network, distance, common language, trade, coloniality, e capital, GDP growth. What they what she do? She divide the country according to the income per capita. Low, middle, and high. But in this analysis, she's not divided anymore for reason of entrance. She's pulling all the number together. Remember that before you have 6,000 and 9,000 and education, and now we have 4, 2, and 8. She's taking all together, divided by level of income. And the income per capita in the origin country is not significant in low-income country, while in middle-income country is positive, in high-income country is negative. But if you study the migration without taking into account the type of migration, you have different results. These are the results if you pull them all together. And the unemployment rate is not there. GDP per capita growth in destination is positive for all the specification, while the unemployment rate for family unification was not significant. Nectar is always important. Trade here is important. Why was not important before? Common language and colonial link are less important here, only for high-income country. They're not important colonial link for middle and low-income country. So I'm not saying that this analysis is wrong. I'm just saying that the research in economics is putting together everything. It's not distinguishing by channel of entrance. And sometimes the result, especially in the past, were pulling together also asylum seeker. And asylum seeker, in general, we have a different model. We have migration flow, GDP per capita, fertility. No, this is sorry, the other. We have asylum application, GDP per capita, and after we have specific variable that are political. After, but later on we have distance, network, distance, colonial link, common language, employment rate. So we have the usual one with in between democracy, political terror, area affected by conflict, population growth, high intensity conflict. So we have, and in fact, here we have GDP in the capital origin is negative, as for labor, you see? For labor is negative for only for high income countries, not for low. Democracy, political terror affect or high intensity population growth is decreasing migration. Why? Because the population is growing, you need more resources to survive there, but also in general, the political situation is better. And employment rate in destination is positive. Geographical distance, common language, the network is positive as usual. So my point is that we should do more analysis by reason of entrance, because the only work done by Migali showed very different results. And why this is important? Because when we make forecast, we forecast in an appropriate way, while family migration could be forecasted easily. You take the nationality, you select people with the right age, and you apply to them the probability of unifying family member. See, the promise to migrate obtained by total. In general, the forecast, I don't want to be continue criticize forecasts, but forecasts are very insufficient because they use coefficient of propensity applied to all the communities. So for wage, community, distance, and this coefficient are a mix of labor migration, family reunification, study, and asylum. However, the problem is that this phenomenon don't move the composition of the migrant by channel of entry is very different. It's very, very different. Let me go to this slide. You remember this is a no slide, but these data are not always a. In Morocco, the majority is entry as family member. So if you want to forecast future Moroccan migration, you should apply, if you want to apply, you have to apply the model used for family unification, not the one for labor, because the majority, Morocco is an old immigration country, so migrants are already there, and they let in only family, mainly family members. Like for instance, for China. China, they have mainly students. So you have to apply the model which used the variable for student migrants. Ukrainians were in the past fundamentally labor migrants. In Turkey, 50% are family members. In Brazil, they are education. The majority is education after their family unification. So education family member represents 73% of the total inflow Brazilian. In India, you have still a lot of employment migration. They are mainly going to UK and to family at all. Turkey is going in the same direction that Morocco. The majority are education or family. So in addition, you have to distinguish by, you apply the probability of migrate to a cohort, the young cohort, which is 23, 24, 23, 24 to 35. This is the most important cohort for migration. But the model, the coefficient that you should apply to this size of cohort is the one which is prevailing among the reason of entries in the country. If you don't do this, you don't take into account the different composition. For example, Chinese, you remember Migali was showing that the students are not sensitive to the GNP of the origin country, while instead are very sensitive to an unemployment rate in destination country. Less than work migrant, but much more than family member. So for China, you should apply this coefficient, not the one of the destination country, while instead for Ukraine, you should apply the labor market. For Morocco, you should apply at large the coefficient for family member. And this is important because when you look at the evolution of these are the permit issues, so is the flow, you see that the family is always the largest. Family migrant are something like 750 people, no more. And instead, asylum seeker are, this is the composition, in 2015, the Syrian increased a lot. So you should apply for them the model for asylum seeker. So this is just to say that is very important because each nationality has different channel of entrance, and the coefficient should be, to make forecast, should be applied the one for the specific group which is prevailing. And this is explained, this is not done, and this is explained why the forecasts are wrong. Sorry, was the forecast are wrong. And it is very important to understand and to analyze better the drive of family members, because Morocco has a lot of, the majority of people enter through this channel. We should better know the legislation, but you should better know the coefficient. This model is continuing, has changing. We should put the square to understand the linearity. So we should have, to understand Moroccan migration, more analysis on this channel. So the driver exists. We should do more research in this field. The opportunity are difficult because the data set available are the one that we need. Individual data set, not only averages. If we do averages already enough, but the individual data set, as in 2015, there was a data, is more efficient. And forecasts are very important because you want to change the legislation. You want to revise the legislation, not only for family unification, but frequently you want to revise the policy that allows in labor market, students, asylum seekers. So you should better know the propensity to move of people to finalize the result. Okay, if there are not questions, I think it is difficult to have because the subject is so little covered. I simply announced the next conference in which Salvatore Stozza Gabrielli will, this Friday, will speak about the integration of family members. If they are more integrated than they work than the student, or they're less integrated. Of course, we all guess that will be less integrated than the labor market. Then, thank you very much.